Hi, I'm Marie Elizabeth, and this is Relationship Alchemy. Today I'm going to be talking about closing the gap. What do I mean by that? Well, about 7 years ago, our dog Phoenix started showing signs of fear aggression. So we took her to a trainer in Los Angeles who specializes in aggressive dogs. And one of the practices he taught us to work with her around this, given that her type of aggression was particularly fear-based, which meant she was ungrounded, which meant she was afraid, which meant she was unsettled, what he taught us to do as her alphas was to sit near her and with our bodies quite grounded and settled, so making sure our nervous systems were settled, to be near her so that she could settle. So we would close the gap. This obviously, you don't do this with a dog you don't know. This is what you do with a dog who is in your care. Please don't go out there and get close to aggressive dogs. This is not what I'm suggesting you do. And we so loved this practice that we brought it into our relationship. And what it looks like in our relationship is when one of us is ungrounded, honestly, it's more often me, but when one of us is ungrounded and the other one's in the room, we'll often sit next to the more ungrounded person with the grounded system, and that helps the person settle down. So what this looks like in practice is, let's say I'm upset about something that's happened in my day. Sometimes Patrick will just sit next to me and lean in a little bit, and I'll lean on him a little bit, and over time my system will settle down again. My nervous system will come down. This can also, or vice versa, occasionally it happens in the other direction where he's more ungrounded and I ground him. But the thing that we've noticed that's fun is when we get into a spat. Like if we're beefing with each other and it's starting to get heated, of course, the impulse is often to get away from that. Especially Patrick, he tends to want to leave the room when the energy gets high and hot and fierce. He loves my ferocity, and there comes a point where sometimes he wants to leave the room. And what he's learned to do in those moments is to do the opposite, to come in closer and interrupt the pattern. So what he'll sometimes do is he'll sometimes come in and pin me in a hug, and I'm because I'm still pissed. And he'll yell, "I'm closing the gap!" And we have permission to play there. We have a lot of playfulness when we're disagreeing with each other. Again, don't try this at home without warning your partner or letting them know, hey, I want to try this new thing. If one of us is ungrounded and the other one is grounded, we don't have to say anything. Let's just sit near each other and see what happens. Let the more ungrounded system settle. And what you can do in your relationship with permission, like get consent in advance to play with, hey, if the energy starts getting high, would you be open to playing with closing the gap as a pattern interrupt? So if there's a typical way your arguments tend to go and one of you tends to storm out the room, have the person who typically storms out the room not do that and stand their ground or come in closer. Maybe you don't get the other person in a bear hug right away. Maybe that's a bit of an advanced play, but you stand your ground and you stay in the room and you inch a little closer. Maybe you just inch closer and you say, I'm closing the gap, and try to say it with some playfulness and fun in your voice because it's something you've agreed to in advance that you're going to do together. And I'm going to tell you an example. So a couple of years ago, Patrick got an injury, and it really made him nervous because it was in the same knee that he has had surgery on before. And so he came home super ungrounded, jangly, afraid. And I was already sore from standing for like 9 hours. I hadn't really handled my standing, sitting, desk situation well. And also I had hurt my tailbone, so it hurt to sit down. So I was just standing all day. And so he came home injured like this, and I did a bunch of stuff. I walked the dogs, I had to bring up packages. There was just a lot that had to be done. So by the time I was washing his breakfast dishes, mind you, because I don't leave dishes in the sink. By the time I was washing his breakfast dishes, I was pretty irritated, and I started laying into him and about the dishes because I was pissed because my back was on fire. It was literally burning intensely with pain by that point. And there was the nervousness because we had a trip coming up, and there was nervousness for me around his knee, like what does it mean if he has to have a second surgery? There was just a lot of fear on both our parts about our individual bodies, and for me especially, we had this physically intense trip coming up. So I finished the dishes. I wasn't proud of it, like of how I laid into him, but it's just what my nervous system could handle at the moment. I lay down on the floor. I started to let my back settle, like I just had to lie on the floor to let the burning subside, right? And I was so blown away by what he did next, because he hobbled over to me. I was lying on the kitchen floor. He hobbled over from the couch where he was elevating his knee that was hurting, and he laid down on the floor next to me and touching the whole length of my body with his body and didn't say anything. He just lay down and touched my body. And that gesture, it still makes me emotional. That gesture just meant so much to me, because here was a moment where I felt shame for having lashed out. I was in intense physical pain, which tends to make me more reactive. And I felt bad about it because he was in pain too. So I felt bad getting on him about the breakfast dishes. And he chose, that was a really skillful choice in that moment, rather than the two of us lie suffering in our separate locations, me on the kitchen floor and him on the couch. Instead of staying separate and continuing to suffer and nursing our resentments at each other, he chose in that moment to close the gap, and to do so quietly with no fanfare. He just came and lay down next to me, touching the side of my body he was up against, not pushing, but just touching. And it really, my whole system eventually, in a few minutes, settled down. And it just moved me so much. And this is the power of courage, of willingness to be the one who goes first. We alternate on that. What I mean by that is it takes a lot of courage to be the partner who goes first, who apologizes first, who closes the gap first, who extends the olive branch first. Patrick and I alternate quite a bit. It's not one of us always doing it, but it takes a lot of courage to be the one that goes first. And in a moment when you're already injured and the other person's mad at you, it's like it takes a lot of guts to be the one who goes first. And that's always stayed in my mind as one of the examples of the nobility of his character, and why I so love being in relationship with him, because in some crucial moments like that, when he could choose to do his default patterning, which would be to exit the situation, he makes the conscious choice to go against it and to close the gap. And I wanted to highlight that practice and that specific moment as an invitation to you in your own relationships, whether they be family members, an intimate partner, probably not a business situation, because touch in the workplace, not so much, but you don't necessarily have to be touching a person. So if you notice at work, a member of your team feels ungrounded, you could just sit near them and ground yourself, meaning feel your feet, settle your energy, relax your breathing, exhale longer than your inhale. Anything that settles your system when you're in proximity to another person that can help them settle. Now that's making me think about how amazing it is when somebody comes in a room and their energy pervades, they shift the tone of the whole room. If you have a strong nervous system, you can do that. This is why I'm such a proponent of nervous system training, like training yourself to be steady in higher and higher intensity situations so that you can be a person who goes into a volatile room and settles the room. That's closing the gap on a big scale. And the way to practice is doing it on a small scale at home. And so that is my invitation for today. Start playing with closing the gap. If you have an anxious pet, do that with your pet first, then try it on a person with consent. And then you can graduate to doing it without having to be touching, right? In spaces where you're simply walking into a room and grounding the room because your system is stable and strong. That's an incredible service, and it's also a very powerful seat to hold as a person. So today we've been talking about closing the gap. I'd love to hear how this lands with you, so you're welcome to message me. And if you have any questions, I'd love to just let me know. And I also want to announce that I have a new quiz that is in the show notes that I'm super excited about. It's called your Grown Ass Power Quiz, and it's for women, grown women, who are ready to deepen into another octave of their power, clarity, purpose, especially if you've been working hard for a long time and successful, and suddenly it started to feel flat, or you don't feel as excited. Maybe you're teetering on the edge of burnout. And my invitation here is this could be your soul calling for a deepening of your relationship to yourself, what I call your passion body. And this quiz shows you which of the 5 passion body archetypes you live in, which archetype are you, and where the pitfalls are and the strengths are, and what you need to focus on to expand and deepen your connection to your power. So you are invited, women who are in this spot where you're noticing, oh, the old ways I've been doing things don't really cut it anymore, and I'm needing something new, a new direction, a new deepening. Maybe I'm bored in my relationship, whatever it is. I invite you to take the Grown Ass Power Quiz, because it could be that your soul is calling you to a deeper activation of your power, and this quiz is a great place to start. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, remember that a great relationship starts with you. Be willing to go first. Close the gap.